Hi, today we're going to be thinking about the best hopes question, which is the question that I think is the foundation for pretty well everything we do really in solution-focused brief therapy. And we're going to be thinking about the question word by word in detail. So let's start here. Solution focus, as many of you know, is a non-normative approach. One of the things you have to learn in solution focus is to give up needing to know things, to give up needing to know about problems, to know about what causes them, to know about solutions, and to know what people need to do. We need to let go of all that knowing. And one of the things that actually we have to give up knowing about is what we should be talking about with people. And so, as our friend in Malmo, Harry Corman, says, if you don't know what the client wants, then we have no questions to ask. We literally wouldn't know what to focus on. We wouldn't know where to start in the conversation unless the client has told us what they want, unless, in other words, they've answered the best hopes question. Michael Durant in Sydney, in his nice paper that you can find on his website, Confessions of an Unashamed Solution-Focused Purist, he reminds us that starting a piece of work with the best hopes question or similar, it doesn't have to be framed precisely as what are your best hopes from our talking together, but nonetheless an outcome-oriented question. That starting a piece of work with that question or similar question is one of the three prerequisites for defining a piece of work as solution focused. So this question, the best hopes question, or one of its friends, is absolutely central in our approach. It's not just central, it's foundational in our approach. It's a sine qua non. If you don't ask it, it isn't solution focused. Now, I've touched on this already, really. Does it matter how you frame the question? And I would say it doesn't. You need to ask the question that comes comfortably from your mouth. Now, Chris Harvey and I at Brief, we have indeed been asking the best hopes question, what are your best hopes from our talking together, for many, many years as the starting point of our therapy. But equally, we could ask, how will you, or perhaps better, how might you know that our talking together has ended up being of use to you? Or we could ask, what difference are you hoping that our talking together might make to you and your life? Or indeed, if our talking together to end up being useful to you, how would you be able to tell? All of those questions, they all move in the same direction. They're all asking the client for a focus, for a direction. They're asking the client what the client wants from our talking together. Now, let's start thinking about the question itself and its construction. And let's start with the very first word, what? What are your best hopes from our talking together? And look, what you'll notice at once is we're not asking people, do you have any best hopes from our talking together? We're actually presupposing that people have come to us with best hopes. Indeed, even if we're in their home doing a domiciliary session, we would assume that people are talking with us for a good reason, that they want something. Now, what they want might not always be, of course, what they've been referred for. but somehow to assume that people are agreeing to talk with us without wanting anything from that conversation could be thought to be mildly insulting in some ways. It would be a very silly thing to do. And why would we choose to regard our clients as rather silly people? So we assume they want something, and it's our job to ask questions in order to elicit what they want from us, and to do that as soon as possible. Because until we know what people want, we can't really start work. So we really wouldn't want to waste people's time. Look, the second word that we're going to think about is are. What are your best hopes from our talking together? We're interested in what people want at the point that they arrive in the session, not what they might have wanted at some point in the past, not what they might have wanted when they spoke to the referrer, but actually now. What are your best hopes from our talking together? And although we don't say it, now. What are you thinking now about how you'll know that our talking together has been useful to you? And then a key word, your. What are your best hopes from our talking together? We're interested in the person who's sitting here. We want the person who's sitting with us to be right at the heart of the consultation. This isn't about the referrer's best hopes, and certainly it's not about my best hopes for people. It's about the person who's come to us, their best hopes. And one of the greatest challenges, one of the things that many of us find difficult to learn, or have found difficult to learn, is centralizing the person who's come to us, their thinking, and keeping our thinking out of their way in the conversation, marginalizing our own thinking. So, where do we go next? Well, let's go to hopes. Let's jump over best. We'll come back to best. But let's go to hopes. What are your best hopes from our talking together? And look, hopes is an important word. And it's an important word because of the way it's defined. You can only hope for something that's possible. You could desire, you could wish, you could dream about things that are not possible. You could desire things that are terribly, terribly, terribly unlikely. But you can only hope for something that's possible. So if the client were to answer the question with something that's impossible, a bereaved client, for example, who starts by saying, look, the only thing that would make a difference to me would be if, whoever it is, so-and-so were back with me. That isn't an answer to the question. Because as much as you could wish it, as much as you could desire it, you can't hope for it. And so it would be legitimate both to acknowledge the wish, of course. And what are your best hopes from our talking together? It really is about hopes, not desires, not wishes, not dreams. And then we can hop back to best. What are your best hopes from our talking together? Best, look, that's an important word too. These hopes we're inviting people to talk about. They're not just mundane, everyday, boring sorts of hopes. This is exciting talk. It's their best hopes. What's the best that they could hope for from our talking? And using the word best already begins to convey our confidence, our belief in the client. This isn't someone who can just be invited to think about small little changes. We're inviting them to share with us their best hopes, potentially something big. And the next word, though, look, it's a word that sometimes can disappear because it seems as if it's a rather insignificant little word. But the word from. What are your best hopes from our talking together? And it's an important word. Look, we have trialed 2 words at that point. Trial seems a bit grand, but we tried 2 different words. What are your best hopes for our talking? What are your best hopes from our talking? And in our view, from works better in solution focus. If you use the word for, what are your best hopes for our talking together? People seem to be more likely, more often, to talk about things that relate to the conversational process. So they're more likely to say, for example, well, my best hopes for our talking together are that I will be able to get everything off my chest. That's about the conversation. My best hopes for will be that somehow I'll be able to understand how come life got to be so difficult for me, if you like. And although that's not entirely within the conversational process, nonetheless, it relates at some level to that conversational process. Whereas if we use the word from, people tend to focus on their outside life, their lived life, their quality of lived life. And that's the material that we work with in solution focus. Now, of course, we can always move from a for type response and invite people to translate it into a from type response. But just asking the question from tends to make the process a tiny bit smoother. And then we could perhaps put the last 3 words together. Our talking together. All right. What are your best hopes from our talking together? So the focus of the conversation isn't about someone's life ambitions. It's focused on what could they hope from this, from our talking together. All right. People might have all sorts of ambitions, but what are they hoping for from our talking together? That, you could say, is the only thing that it's legitimate for me to focus on. Asking people about things that don't relate to the therapeutic process could be seen to be perhaps intrusive rather than nosy. So what I'm legitimated in talking about are the things that people hope will flow from the conversational process that we're about to have. So it's about this, what we do together. And of course, it's from our talking together. We're not actually predefining how many sessions the client will have. At that point, who knows whether it's going to be 1 or whether it's going to be 21. It's from the talking. And of course, it's not from this session. You know, sometimes I think people fall into the trap of inviting people to talk about what are your best hopes from our talking together today, from this session. That's such a hard question. Because very often people, I think, have to think, well, goodness, we're not going to do the whole job today. It's going to take a bit longer. So I'm going to have quite a few sessions. And that's what I want in all of the sessions we could have together. And how much of that could I expect to get today? That is such a difficult question to answer. So it's just too difficult. So it's from our talking together. And then in addition to that, let's just think of those words. It's our talking. This is as a cooperative process. It's something within which we're both engaged. We're going to be partners in this process. It's our talking. It's not my talking to you. It's not my, in some senses, curing you or treating you or telling you what to do. It's from our talking together. The solution-focused approach is a cooperative approach, a partnership-based approach within which we both contribute our unique talents and skills. The person who comes for the session, they bring their expertise on their own life, what they want, their best ways of doing things. And I bring a expertise, a familiarity with a way of talking that's associated with people being more likely to achieve what they want. But really importantly, we're going to be talking together. It's together. The work is together. So here we are. Here's the question. What are your best hopes from our talking together? And each and every word, as you see within that question, plays its part. The words are carefully chosen. And if I think back now to 1999, when I first heard Chris Iveson, Brief, a colleague, using this question, I could immediately see the usefulness of it. But I had no idea back in 1999 that some years later, so many of our solution-focused colleagues throughout the world would somehow have come to the conclusion that that question that Chris Iveson started asking actually is a fantastically useful way to open solution-focused processes. And indeed, I would guess that it's now become the most common opening question in any solution-focused process. And indeed, it's become so common that almost people take it for granted. You know, people don't reference it. They don't, when they write the best hopes question, they've forgotten to write afterwards. I think it was George Iveson and Ratner, Problem to Solution, 1990, second edition, expanded edition, 1990. And they don't do that. It's just part of the wallpaper. It's part of what we do in solution focus. It's so common and so taken for granted that, as I say, it's no longer referenced. Look, I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found that useful. If you want to contact me, then my email address is, as you can see it, evangeorge@brief.org.uk. You can find out more about our work and what we offer on the Brief website. There's loads of videos and material on our YouTube page. And there's more than 4 years worth of regular writings and comments on solution focus on our Facebook page. So, as I say, I hope this was useful, and see you again.